I only have one message to give you. I don't care what you think of me. I don't care what you call me. I do care what you do with this information because it is important to our survival as a species.
You know, as humans, we can identify galaxies light years away. We can study particles smaller than an atom, but we still haven't unlocked the mystery of the 3 pounds of matter that sits between our ears. Today, scientists possess the capability to study individual neurons and figure out the main functions of certain areas of the brain. But a human brain contains almost 100 billion neurons, making trillions of connections. So as a result, we're still unable to cure diseases like Alzheimer's or autism or fully reverse the effects of a stroke. And the most powerful computer in the world isn't nearly as intuitive as the one we're born with. So there's this enormous mystery waiting to be unlocked. And the BRAIN Initiative will change that by giving scientists the tools they need to get a dynamic picture of the brain in action and better understand how we think and how we learn and how we remember. And that knowledge will be transformative.
First, we put people in the magnet for several hours, and we show them movies, and we build a model of their brain. And then in the second part, we put them back in the magnet, we show them new movies, and we measure their brain activity, and we decode their brain activity in order to reconstruct the movie. So on the left here is the movie we actually showed people, and on the right is our reconstruction. When the movie that we showed has a fairly common object like a person, our reconstructions are actually fairly accurate. But when the movie that we showed is something rarer, as you'll see in a second, like this abstract thing, then our reconstructions are coarser. Not really so much over here, I guess. I think you'll be able to use this kind of technology for communicating with people who can't communicate, like locked-in patients or people with neurological diseases. I think you could maybe use this in some forms of psychotherapy or dream analysis. I think there's a lot of potential clinical applications for this.
So I think, let's see, where do I start? One of the zanier things I think DARPA's ever funded was the idea that you could, or they asked a question, which was rather controversial actually, and I'll get to that later. Could you take a living insect and implant it with radios and neurostimulators and neuromuscular stimulators, or whatever you wanted really, and could you fly that little insect around like an airplane? Could you use it as a nano-air vehicle? In fact, it does work. We built these things and we flew them around and had demos and stuff like that. And so this was quite an interesting sort of process to go through all of this from the sort of science to the engineering. More recently, you're about to hear, I think, the next talk from Edward Chang, who's going to talk about this very amazing and sort of ambitious project in which we play a small part in the sense that we developed technology to do wireless microelectrocortical recording. And that was now playing a role in the subnets proposal through a company called Cortera that we founded with Jan Rabai and Ricky Muller and Peter Ludohovitz and other people. And so this was also, really worked its way into the goals and visions that DARPA is pushing in neurointerfaces. And these days I do, in fact, quite a lot of neurointerfacing stuff. I really believe that's one of these areas where this hybridicity is going to be a big deal. We, about a year and a half ago, put out this idea, and now, thankfully, working with DARPA on this, wherein we suggested that there's been this sort of amorphous idea, or this sort of vague dream in the area of people doing neuroelectrophysiological recording, that one day you'd be able to miniaturize everything and shove it into brain tissue and sort of RFID out information from the brain. Wouldn't that be great? We could, there might be advantages to this. And we started by showing that we didn't really believe using RF that was possible for very fundamental reasons. And after we sort of laid out the math for why that was, we then pointed out that there was an unexplored area where you could build something like this using ultrasonics. So you could build very, very, very fine ultrasonic objects, 100 microns on a side is sort of the goal. This is what we call neural dust, which you can couple energy to, and they will use that energy, record locally, and then backscatter communicate through the ultrasonic signal. We're building these. We're using them in peripheral preparations right now, and it's looking really good.
Now, brain hacking has been a futuristic fascination for decades. But we all understand that actually fully understanding the brain is going to take many, many years of work. But With GVS, we can actually get started right now by building devices that can impact small parts of the brain, hack those little areas, just like the one we created. Thank you very much.
Our goal is to record from and stimulate spikes in neurons and do so in a way that is orders of magnitude more than anything that's been done to date, and safe and good enough that you can, it's not like a major operation. It's sort of equivalent to sort of a LASIK type of thing. So this is in contrast to the best FDA-approved system, which is like a Parkinson's deep brain stimulation thing, which would have on the order of 10 electrodes. So the system, even in version 1 that we're going to unveil today, is capable of 1,000 times more electrodes than the best system out there, and they're all read and write. So this is really quite, I mean, for something to be 1,000 times more than what is publicly approved is quite a big difference. So there's very tiny threads that are about a tenth, roughly, of the cross-sectional area of a human hair. So they're extremely tiny threads. In fact, the threads that we have, like I said, even in version 1, are about the same size as a neuron. So if you're going to go stick something in your brain, you want it to not be giant, you want it to be tiny.
You see, they'll tell you that they're actively working on trying to read your mind with implantable devices, basically the size of neurons, or using technology to manipulate your own neurons. So that's what they admit. What they don't tell you, though, is that they also simultaneously work on wireless and remote methods to actually monitor and control your neurons. So check this out. This is an article from learningmind.com. It's called Remote Neural Monitoring. Is it possible to spy on someone's thoughts? All of us have been through this process, wondering if someone could read your thoughts. And the new and improved technologies being developed around the world supposedly to deal with crime and terrorism and inadvertently intrude on one's privacy should probably bring us all back to the brink of paranoia. These technologies are funded by governments at the highest level, and some of the countries involved include the USA, UK, Spain, Germany, and France. Recently, the infamous NSA has developed a very efficient method of controlling the human brain. This technology is called remote neural monitoring and is expected to revolutionize crime detection and investigation. The below information is based on the statement by Robert C. Gunn, Ph.D., NSA clinical psychologist currently indicted for human and constitutional rights violations of mind control. RNM works remotely. Ever wonder why have we all been driven relentlessly toward wireless systems? To control the brain under the objective to detect any criminal thought taking place inside the mind of a possible culprit. Think Tom Cruise, Minority Report, that type of thing, pre-crime. And in different ways they've, publicized how they're going to do it, as far as detecting, where to strategically place police cars in certain neighborhoods, because certain crimes occur at certain times, and they have these algorithms to determine the best spots to put police cars. They'll say excuses like that in order to normalize this type of thing. The inevitable question: how can you isolate a criminal thought if you do not have a comparative measure of non-criminal thoughts? Which is a very good question. I was a truck driver for a little while, drove cross country. The reason I stopped is because most people are so stupid that trying to drive that on the road is a Herculean task, because people cut you off, short stop you, all sorts of stuff. So it's really dangerous. Good money, though. But the reason I bring it up is because towards the end of me driving for this specific company, they actually wanted to put a camera inside my vehicle. And I argued against it, and I was successful. But what they told me was, we want to put a camera inside because we want to be able to determine if there's an accident, who is at fault. So the system will only take footage from 7 seconds before and 7 seconds after an impact has been detected. And then they'll use that footage to let you know if you're at fault or whatever during the investigation. But when they told me that, they just kind of said it casually, but I immediately was like, wait, so they 7 seconds before and 7 seconds after? I'm like, so in order to get the footage before, that means it would have had to have been continuously recording me, because it can't possibly know that I would be getting in an accident. So to get 7 seconds before, you, like I said, would have to have been watching me the whole time. And they're like, well, it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, you're telling me to ignore common sense. I'm like, okay, so if I receive a phone call while I'm driving, and I answer that call on speakerphone or whatever, because I'm not allowed to have it in my hands, and you're recording my phone calls, you're technically violating wiretapping laws, right? And they didn't know what to say to that. I'm like, yeah, so I'm having my privacy violated supposedly as a pretext for safety and things like that. But basically the goal is to monitor everything all the time, and they want to get inside your head. That should scare the shit out of you people. Sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent, but it's the same thought, you know. How can you isolate a criminal thought if you don't have a comparative measure of non-criminal thoughts? So you can't isolate that one thought if you're not recording. You have to record them all to even isolate it to begin with, you know. The research studies have shown that the human intellect thinks at a speed of about 60 bits per second, and therefore does not have the capability to contest with supercomputers acting via satellites, implants, and biotelemetry. The human brain has a characteristic set of bioelectric resonance structures. By using supercomputers, the R&M system can home in on it and send messages through an embedded individual's nervous system in order to affect their performance in a preferred way. The entire system has been developed after about 50 years of neuroelectromagnetic human experimentations claimed to be involuntary, but there is no evidence to support it. According to some scientists involved in the program, within a few years it is expected that DNA microchips, under the guise of medical breakthroughs, will be presented to launch the disease cure processes on speed, and efficiency might be implanted in the human cerebrum, which would make it inherently controllable. Okay, so basically they're saying they're going to inject it into your head. I think that's BS. I think that they can inject you in certain spots in your body, and you would be able to have it migrate in your body to the desired location. And specifically, like I said, with the pineal gland, which is made up of very permeable membranes and capillaries right outside your blood-brain barrier. And when they're putting that Q-tip into your nose to test you or whatever for COVID, supposedly, it's going all the way in, almost touching that very vulnerable area. So they could be putting nanoparticles on that could be going into your brain. They already want to introduce DNA vaccines. Bill Gates is talking about that. That's probably what they're going to introduce in the fall, is a DNA RNA vaccine. And it just said here, according to scientists involved in the program, within a few years it's expected that DNA microchips, under the guise of medical breakthroughs, will be presented to launch the disease cure processes. You know, we need a vaccine to prevent COVID, to sustain herd immunity. You know, all these excuses, whatever. They're just going to say whatever they have to say. But you and I know the goal is to ultimately get everyone chipped for ultimate control. And if they can control your thoughts, there's not much else that they can't do after that point, guys. If they have total control over you as an individual and you are not autonomous or sovereign anymore, you know, how is that a good thing in any way? Yeah, they can frame it or sell it however they want, beneficial even, but very, very few people would benefit with this technology. But the potential for misuse and abuse is too great to let it develop and continue, in my opinion. So, you know, I'm not saying, you know, I don't want blind people to see or anything like that, but like I said, the potential for abuse is far greater than the actual benefits we get from it. So I say this type of stuff should not be developed, and it should not be pursued in any way. It's fundamentally against freedom in every sense of the word. At present, around the world, supercomputers are watching millions of people at the same time with a speed of 20 terabits per second. Terabits per second, guys. That's insane. Particularly in countries like the USA, Japan, Israel, and a number of European countries. A similar program is supposedly underway in Russia. How does R&M work? It employs a set of programs functioning at different levels, like the signals intelligence system, which applies electromagnetic frequencies to excite the brain for the system, and the electronic brain link. The brain stimulation system that has been planned as particle emission intelligence, which means receiving information from unintentionally created electromagnetic waves in the environment. However, it is not related to radioactivity or nuclear detonation. The recording machines that have electronic equipment to examine electrical action in human beings from afar. This computer-generated brain charting can always record all electrical events in the cerebrum. The recording aid systems deciphers individual brain maps for security purposes. The underlying technology of the system takes into consideration that the electrical activity in the speech center of the brain can be translated into the subject's verbal thoughts. R&M can send encrypted signals to the audio cortex of the brain, directly circumventing the ear. The Air Force had a weapon developed late 80s, I believe, early 90s, called Voice to Skull, which they supposedly used against the Kurds in the Gulf War, I believe, making them think that God was talking to them. They were able to beam the words into their skull, basically. And yeah, that should scare you. They got them to put their weapons down and surrender, thinking that God was talking to them. You know what I mean? It makes you kind of think and go, man, like, people who hear voices and see things and all that, like schizophrenics, we can try to write them off, but I mean, if you really think about it, for all we know, they could be unwitting, participants in an experiment, you really never know at this point. The stuff they have out there is insane. The worst thing you could do is write somebody off. Not to say schizophrenia doesn't exist or anything like that, but it definitely makes me question, is it natural, is it organic? This encoding assists in detecting audio communication. It can also perform electrical mapping of the cerebrum's activity from the visual center, which is achieved by avoiding the eyes and optic nerves, consequently projecting imageries from the subject's mind onto a video display. I showed you that in the beginning of this video. What they publicly show you and what they actually have behind the scenes are two different things. They will give you some truth, but they're not going to tell you how far advanced they are. They're just not going to do it for various reasons. Same thing with deep fakes. They have the technology to make it look like you did or said anything, and the whole thing could be completely manufactured and fabricated, and how would you defend against it? They could have you commit a murder, they could have you commit rape, they could have whatever on camera, and it would look real, and how would you argue it? So it's like, they tell you that they have these things, but they're not going to tell you just how good it is, because, they're not going to. It's just common sense. So when you're able to take someone's thoughts and put them on a screen, or someone's dreams and put them on a screen in 4K or higher resolution, that's insane. And I showed you that they're able to do that. Like I said, how far along are they? Who knows? They're not going to tell us. The machinery involved can remotely and non-invasively detect information by digitally decoding the evoked potentials in 30 to 50 hertz, 5 megawatt electromagnetic emissions from the cerebrum. Evoked potentials are called the spikes and patterns created by the nerves as they produce a shifting electrical pattern with an ever-changing magnetic instability, which then puts on a constant amount of electromagnetic waves. The interesting part about this is that the entire exercise is carried out without any physical contact with the subject. They don't even have to be in a van across the street, guys. They already admit that they can detect individuals by their heartbeat, because every heartbeat is unique, and they're able to actually track you anywhere in the world based off your unique heartbeat. So if they're able to do that remotely, all they have to do is figure out, what frequency or, whatever the nomenclature is, whatever your brain is operating at. And if they can hack into that remotely, view your thoughts, put thoughts into your head, I mean, these things are really real, and you need to actually consider that this stuff is real. I mean, why are they having everything shut down? 5G supposedly operates on this same frequency. And it's, they admit that they have the active denial system in the military. We had that for crowd control. Make your skin feel like it's on fire. They have weapons to put voices in your head using ELF, low frequency, microwaves. So it's like, if they can monitor your thoughts, put thoughts in your mind, I mean, that's scary, guys. You have to think this stuff does exist. It goes back to MK Ultra too. They wanted to ultimately control the human mind. The mechanism needs to decrypt the resonance frequency of each specific site to modulate the input of information in that specific location of the cerebrum. Furthermore, R&M can detect audio via microwaves, what I was just talking about. It features the broadcast of precise directives into the subconscious, producing visual disorders, schizophrenia, things like that, illusions, and installation of words and numbers into the brain through radiation waves. With all the given paybacks in tracing the unlawful and traitorous activities, there are many alarms and dangers being pointed out by human rights advocates and scientists. The agencies of human rights worldwide have criticized the system as an affront to the basic human rights because it violates privacy and the dignity of considerations and events of life. Several countries have opposed it and refer to it as an offense on their human and civil rights. According with other biological concerns voiced by scientists, remote neural monitoring remains a controversial technology, which is being used in many countries for security, maintenance, and surveillance. And here are the references. If you want to look him up, Robert C. Gunn, PhD, Arbor, Michigan, NSA clinical psychologist, supposedly in jail right now for human rights violations. So yeah, guys, this stuff is real.
Major League Baseball? I told you they were monitoring my activities.
He's right. This thing's got info on everybody. Addresses, credit ratings, what size baseball hat they wear.
Surveillance beam disabled. Market research shutting down. Doesn't that beat all?
Hi, folks. I'm Mark McGuire.
Big Mac himself. Who'd have thunk it?
Young Bart here was right. We are spying on you pretty much around the clock.
But why, Mr. McGuire?
Do you want to know the terrifying truth? Or do you want to see me sock a few dingers?
Dingers! Dingers!
Yoink.
Hello, Earth. I'm Alec Baldwin, TV star. They say TV will rot your brain. That's absurd. TV only softens the brain like a ripe banana to take it all the way. We've created Hulu. Hulu beams TV directly to your portable computing devices, giving you more of the cerebral gelatinizing shows you want anytime, anywhere, for free.
I only act out because I want your love. God almighty.
Mushy mush. And the best part is there's nothing you can do to stop it. I mean, what are you going to do, turn off your TV and your computer? Once your brains are reduced to a cottage cheese like mush, we'll scoop them out with a melon bowler and gobble them right on up. Oops. I think I'm drooling a little. Because we're aliens. And that's how we roll. Hulu, an evil plot to destroy the world. Enjoy.
So guys, a lot of you probably don't know who Henricus G. Luce is. The only YouTuber that I've actually seen cover him is a YouTuber named Richie from Boston. Really great YouTuber, one of the best. If you aren't subscribed to him, definitely check him out. He's been censored left and right, more than Titus Frost lately, so I don't know how long he's going to be on the platform, so check him out before he's gone. Titus too. But yeah, this guy, Henricus G. Luce, Hulu is actually named after him. That was his nickname that his coworkers gave him. And this man has several patents spanning several decades, and he was actually employed by DARPA. DARPA is the defense and research wing of the Pentagon. Those are the same people who do invisibility cloaks and all this other sorts of stuff. The same guy that I put in my clip earlier talking about how DARPA wanted to make insects and animals controlled remotely with implants, you know, to be used as spies, whatever. He worked for DARPA too. So DARPA is very much involved in this type of thing. And here's an actual patent. It's right off Google Patents. This is totally real, totally legit. It's called Nervous System Manipulation by Electromagnetic Fields from Monitors. If you haven't watched my video, Technology as a Weapon, watch that after this, pause this, whatever you want to do, but watch that video, because I get into a lot of detail about technology in general, just being a weapon. But the title of this, guys, Nervous System Manipulation by Electromagnetic Fields from Monitors. Okay? Looking at your computer screen, looking at your TV screen, remotely affecting your nervous system. Physiological effects have been observed in a human subject in response to stimulation of the skin with weak electromagnetic fields that are pulsed with certain frequencies, near half a hertz or 2.4 hertz, such as to excite a sensory resonance. Many computer monitors and TV tubes, when displaying pulsed images, emit pulsed electromagnetic fields of sufficient amplitudes to cause such excitation. It is therefore possible to manipulate the nervous system of a subject by pulsing images displayed on a nearby computer monitor or TV set. For the latter, the image pulsing may be embedded in the program material, or it may be overlaid by modulating a video stream, either as an RF signal or as a video signal. The image displayed on a computer monitor may be pulsed effectively by a simple computer program. For certain monitors, pulsed electromagnetic fields capable of exciting sensory resonances in nearby subjects may be generated even as the displayed images are pulsed with subliminal intensity. Here's an image from it, guys. Look at that. Just a big doped up retard watching television. There's a reason they call it television programming, guys. Why would they call it that if it wasn't exactly what it is, which is programming your mind? When you're operating in normal consciousness, you're operating in beta and theta waves primarily. When you sleep, your brain shifts over to what's known as alpha-delta waves. Those alpha-delta waves, basically that's what your brain does when it's watching television. It tricks your mind into thinking it's asleep when it's not, and it's able to implant ideas into your head subliminally. So your subconscious is affected by it. I don't know all the science behind it, so I could be wrong, but what I just said, I don't believe I made a mistake in how I explained it, but they admit that they're able to remotely manipulate you through a screen, guys. Look at this face. The reason they call it the idiot box, Jesus. Alright, background of the invention. The invention relates to the stimulation of the human nervous system by an electromagnetic field applied externally to the body. A neurological effect of external electric fields had been mentioned by Wiener in a discussion of the bunching of brain waves through nonlinear interactions. The electric field was arranged to provide a direct electrical driving of the brain. Wiener describes the field as set up by a 10 hertz alternating voltage of 400 volts applied in a room between ceiling and ground. Brennan describes the U.S. patent number, an apparatus for alleviating disruptions in circadian rhythms of a mammal in which an alternating electric field is applied across the head of the subject by 2 electrodes placed a short distance from the skin. So yeah, this is just getting into the actual science, so I'm not going to bore you with that. Let's see. But I will read this. This is the summary. Computer monitors and TV monitors can be made to emit weak low-frequency electromagnetic fields merely by pulsing the intensity of displayed images. Experiments have shown that the half-hertz sensory resonance can be excited in this manner. The 2.4 hertz sensory resonance can also be excited in this manner. Hence, a TV monitor or computer monitor can be used to manipulate the nervous system of nearby people. Let's see. Yeah, well anyway, this isn't the only patent this guy has. You can look into this guy. I can probably find even more. Yeah. Manipulation of nervous systems by electric fields, pulse variability and electric field manipulation of nervous systems. So yeah, you can go through and check this guy's work. I think he even published a book. Yeah, guys, this stuff is real. So, you know.
How do you know you're not a brain in a vat? You know. Right now, here's the thing. You are a brain in a vat. Then that vat is your skull.
Yes.
And everything you see, feel, hear, everything, all your senses are electrical signals. Everything is an electrical signal to a brain in a vat, where the vat is your skull.
And all your hormones, all your neurotransmitters, all these things are drugs. Adrenaline's a drug. Dopamine's a drug. Sure. You're a drug factory.
Well, the first few iterations are, I mean, what I'm talking about is like in the limit over time, you know, with a lot of development. The first few iterations, really in the first few versions, all we're going to be trying to do is solve brain injuries. So it's like, don't worry that this is not going to sneak up on you. This will take a while.
How many years before you don't have to talk?
If the development continues to accelerate, then maybe like 5 years, 5 to 10 years.
That's quick. That's really quick.
That's the best case scenario.
No talking anymore in 5 years.
Best case scenario. But 10 years more like it.
In the context of both psychology and business, when we try to talk about changing behavior, many times we try to teach people and give them more information and think that if we just give them the right information, everything is going to be different. They're going to understand and behave differently. And now we come up with a totally different idea of how we do that. We just change something in your brain that leads you to just wake up with a different behavior and just carry that forward and tell yourself a story that it was always what you wanted. So in many ways, this is not a trivial thing to understand. That these 3 pounds that sit between our ears actually govern who we are and everything that we do, and that they actually allow us to change someone's behavior by just changing small indicators in there.
Imagine a new class of neural implants capable of returning sight to the blind, hearing to the deaf, and even reanimate limbs. Built layer upon layer with high-density electrodes that both stimulate and record electrical and chemical signals in the brain. With a miniaturized electronics package and antenna for wireless control, this new class of fully implantable neural device is designed to flex and bend within the body. The conversation is changing. The clinical quality solutions of tomorrow are here today.
All right, so now I'm going to show you a Freedom of Information request document entitled The Bioeffects of Selected Non-Lethal Weapons. This is out of the Department of the Army. It was addressed to whoever Donald Friedman is. It says your Freedom of Information Act requested May 25th, 2006, the Department of the Army, blah, blah, blah. Here it is. Here's basically the documents you requested. All right. This addendum to the Non-Lethal Technologies Worldwide Study addresses in summary some of the most often asked questions of non-lethal weapons technology, the physiological responses observed in clinical settings of the biophysical coupling and susceptibility of personnel to non-lethal effects weapons. These results identify and validate some aspects of maturing non-lethal technologies that may likely be encountered or used as non-lethal effectors in the future, including laser and other light phenomena, radio frequency directed energy, and oral bioeffects. Keep that in mind right there. Laser and other light phenomena. Oral bioeffects. Just remember that. Alright, now I'm going to get down here. And they can talk about the incapacitating effect, which we went over, the microwave heating, the active denial system, what we had when I was in the Army. I was infantry, and we did have those. Never used them, as far as I know, but we did have them. I don't even think we had them out on missions with us, but we did have them there in the motor pool. So they do exist. I know they exist. I was trained in the use of them if I had to use them. You know what I mean? So they already talk about how it can make you feel like your skin's on fire. But it can also put voices in your head. They did that in the Gulf War to make, I believe, the Kurds put their weapons down, like I said. Let's see if I can find more. Yeah, if the technology functions approximately as envisioned, the targeted individual could be incapacitated within 15 to 30 minutes. Because this technology is focused on a relatively slow onset, it should only be used in situations where speed is not important. The very uncomfortable nature of a high body temperature may be useful in negotiations or possibly for controlling crowds. It would be equally useful on single persons or crowds. Evidence also indicates a disruption of working memory. Thus, disorientation may occur because of an inability to consolidate memory of the recent minutes past. Think like Men in Black flashing that light in front of your face. But they're doing it in your skull. Let's see. Incapacitating effect, microwave hearing. Microwave hearing is a phenomenon described by human observers as the sensations of buzzing, ticking, hissing, or knocking sounds that originate within or immediately behind the head. There is no sound propagating through the air like normal sound. This technology, in its crudest form, could be used to distract individuals. If refined, it could also be used to communicate with hostages or hostage takers directly by Morse code or other message systems, possibly even by voice communication. Let's see. Technological status of generator aiming device. This technology requires no extrapolation to estimate its usefulness. Microwave energy can be applied at a distance, and the appropriate technology can be adapted from existing radar units. Aiming devices, likewise, are available for special circumstances which require extreme specificity. There may be a need for additional development. Extreme directional specificity would be required to transmit a message to a single hostage surrounded by his captors. Signals can be transmitted long distances, hundreds of meters, using current technology. Longer distances and more sophisticated signal types will require more bulky equipment. Incapacitating effect, disruption of neural control. The nature of the incapacitation is a rhythmic activity synchronization of brain neurons that disrupts normal cortical control of the cortical spinal and cortical bulbar pathways. This disrupts normal functioning of the spinal motor neurons, which control muscle contraction and body movements. Persons suffering from this condition lose voluntary control of their body. This synchronization may be accompanied by a sudden loss of consciousness and intense muscle spasms. So they just admitted that they can control your body remotely. The normal function of the brain is to control all forms of behavior, voluntary control of body, and the homeostatic parameters of the organism. In normal conditions, all the brain structures, neuron populations, networks, and single units function with specific rhythmic activity depending on the incoming sensory information, information from mnemonic structures, and signals from visceral organs. Each single neuron provides specific processing of information it receives and forms a specific pattern of impulse firing as outgoing information. Synchronization of neuron activity is a neural mechanism of the brain function that uses such controlling processes as motivation, attention, and memory in order to organize behavior. For example, motivational processes are considered as activating ascending signals that synchronize the neuron activity of specific brain structures and neuron networks. This activation synchronization, in turn, activates specific forms of behavior such as sexual, aggressive, ingestive activities. So they could cause someone to rape someone, is what they just said. They could cause someone to assault somebody. They could cause someone to do something that normally would not be in their character. Think, mass shooters. Think James Holmes. I mean, that guy was literally drugged out in the courtroom. And then you had his psychiatrist, which had links to DARPA, I believe, and I think he even worked for DARPA on this type of technology. Go figure. And then suddenly the guy just shoots up a fucking movie theater, things like this, guys, you have to consider, like, these people could really be patsies that are, targets of their own development. That's crazy, guys. They just said they can manipulate you and make you commit specific forms of behavior such as sexual, aggressive, ingestive activities. In normal functioning, the degree of neuronal synchronization is highly controlled. From experiments that record the neuronal activity in different brain areas simultaneously in animals, it is known that correlation of spike activity between neurons, measured by the correlation level of synchronization, changes depending on the stage of behavior, motivation, attention, or activation of the memory processes. However, under some conditions, such as physical stress, heat shock, or strong emotional stress, the level of synchronization may become higher, involving nonspecific large populations of brain neurons, and the synchronization may become uncontrollable. So let's see. And this is where they say they're at in it, I believe. Nope, actually, let me go down. Technological status of generator aiming device. Sound generating technology is well developed but not highly portable. Aiming devices are poorly developed. Under normal circumstances, sound pressure level decreases when the distance from the source is doubled. For example, if the sound is 100 decibels at 100 feet, at 200 feet the sound would be 94 decibels. At very high sound levels, certain conditions may lead to nonlinear effects in propagation and greatly increase range activity. So, let's see. Laser-induced biological effects. There are three basic damage mechanisms associated with exposure to laser radiation: chemical, thermal, and mechanical or acoustical mechanical. The laser-induced chemical alterations in irradiated tissue are referred to as photochemical damage. The likelihood of laser radiation in the blue light portion of the electromagnetic spectrum inducing photochemical reactions progressively decreases with increasing wavelength. Photochemical effects are not observed upon exposure to radiation with wavelengths exceeding 0.550 to 0.650 microns because the kinetic energy associated with these photons is insufficient to initiate a photochemical change. On the other hand, the thermal effect is a primary mechanism for laser-induced injury. The extent of the injury induced depends upon the wavelength and energy of the incident radiation, duration of exposure, and the nature of the exposed tissue and its absorption characteristics. Generally, all three mechanisms operate concurrently in an irradiated animal. Thermal effects currently predominant for continuous wave lasers, while mechanical effects are of increased significance for pulse mode lasers. So like I said, the reason I brought this up with the lasers thing and told you to remember that, because this right here, let's see if I can make sure I got it actually. Yes. This is an article that I found earlier, and it kind of ties in a weird way. It does talk about the Voice of God Gulf War incident that I brought up earlier, but it also ties into Elon Musk and Warner von Braun Project BLUEBEAM. And I just want to read this because I think it's interesting. So this is the article. And the voice said, "I was at a party in downtown Oakland when I first heard about the Voice of God. It was the usual mix, a few intellectuals from Berkeley and Stanford, the gracious host and hostess, and a gaggle of greedy journalists, of whom I was one. The conversation was highbrow and stilted, but the food was plentiful, so I stayed to chat. It was an innocuous, forgettable evening, except for one thing: a short conversation with an expert in laser optics from Stanford University. His extraordinary tale left me spinning. It involved a clandestine military project with a goal so outrageous that even now it is difficult to comprehend. The story was set in the late 1980s at an undisclosed military research facility hidden in the New Mexico desert. Probably Los Alamos, maybe? I don't know. Here, researchers working with high-powered laser weapons discovered that they could create a glowing ball of fire in the sky." Let me reread that. Here, researchers working with high-powered laser weapons discovered that they could create a glowing ball of fire in the sky by crossing the beams of two powerful infrared lasers. The beams were invisible to the naked eye, but where they intersected, their electrical fields became so intense that they ripped apart molecules in the air, creating a plasma, a luminous mix of high-energy ions and electrons. So think about it, guys. They could make these balls of energy, just orbs, whatever, just balls of light appear in the sky just by intersecting two infrared lasers and ripping apart molecules in the sky to do it and create a plasma. They can do that. So when you see UFOs and you see other things like that, pay real close attention to what they look like and how they move. By moving the laser beams around the sky, the researchers found that they could shift the plasma ball back and forth at a very high speed. They even discovered that by switching the beams on and off and redirecting them to different spots, they could maintain several plasma balls in the air at the same time. At night, they demonstrated their skills, flying their glowing creations in formation above the cold desert. So for all we know, guys, when they talk about UFOs and they're always like, oh, you know, it moved at such incredible speeds, it would not be possible for someone to pilot that, blah, blah, blah. We saw these multiple lights moving in unison, and they just disappeared and reappeared and merged into each other, etc. They just said that they could take lights, or infrared lasers, intersect them in the sky, and create balls of plasma and move them around at will. So all these little things you're seeing might simply just be lasers. You know, it's not all this crazy anti-gravity technology you think might exist. It could simply just be that as a way, I believe, ultimately, if terrorism, pandemics, things like that don't work to get their new world order, they're going to fake an alien invasion. And I'll get into that in a second, but I just thought that that was interesting. Now it says these shows are noisy events. When the intense electric field rips one molecule apart, it releases electrons that smash into its neighbors, breaking them apart and releasing more electrons. This develops into a cascade known as inverse, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, and the result is explosive. Literally, the pressure wave it creates can reach thousands of atmospheres. Even the smallest shock waves sound like firecrackers, and by rapidly pulsing the plasma balls on and off, the researchers created a stream of shock waves that merged together to form a continuous loud hiss, or depending on the frequency of the pulsations, a crackle. Now the tale gets more interesting. According to my fellow party guest, the team discovered that by modulating the frequency and intensity of the hissing sound, they could create a voice-like effect. The result was a highly maneuverable, glowing ball of plasma that seemed to appear out of thin air, a ball of plasma that could, quote-unquote, talk. The U.S. military named the technology the Voice of God and classified it top secret. My contact said that he had heard of plans to use the device as a psychological weapon during the Gulf War in 1991, but that for some reason, these plans were never realized. And there the tale ends. After the party, I contacted the researcher for more details, but he was unable or possibly unwilling to provide them. I was stuck with nothing to follow up, no military facility, no contact numbers, no names, nothing but the idea itself. So is it possible? Does the technology really exist to create glowing balls of plasma that talk? Thus began a quest to discover not whether the voice of God exists, but whether it could exist. My first useful interview was with Leek Marabo, a professor of engineering physics from Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute in New York State, who works with the Propulsion Directorate at the U.S. Air Force Research Lab at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Marabo is no stranger to the way lasers can break down the atmosphere to form a plasma. He uses the effect to propel prototype spacecraft into the air on the tip of a laser beam. Sourced from New Scientist, 10th of January 1998, page 34. But after hearing my story, he sounded skeptical. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be difficult, he said. The first problem, he told me, would be generating the required intensity of several gigawatts per square centimeter. The laser Marabo uses is the most powerful of its kind in the U.S., known as the Pulsed Laser Vulnerability Test System. It generates a rapid series of infrared pulses, each one lasting only 18 microseconds. One pulse has the energy of 450 joules, and the system can generate 20 of them every second. This gives an average power of 9 kilowatts, but the only way Marabo can create inverse, whatever that German word is by focusing this beam down to a point. In this tiny spot, the power density is millions of times higher than in the unfocused beam, and the air explodes. It sounds like a firecracker going off, he said. The focusing optics in Marabo's propulsion system are built into his prototype spacecraft. The back of the craft is a curved mirror, but the voice of God would not have the benefit of a curved mirror or lens floating in the air, and any focusing system built in the laser end of things would have to be huge to operate over long distances. That's another problem. Crossing two laser beams of that would be of little value, according to Don Walters, an atmospheric physicist at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. Crossing the beams only doubles the intensity, but you'd need to increase it by many orders of magnitude, he says. Without the ability to focus the beams, They agreed that the voice of God technology would require lasers vastly more powerful than any that are available today. I suppose they could do it, he told me, referring to the world's most powerful laser at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory near San Francisco. But that's the size of an entire building. They said it seems far-fetched, but they suspect it could work with just one laser. So yeah, guys, I mean, that's kind of crazy that, I mean, they could do that. If they can create balls of plasma just using lasers in the air and then move them, make them appear, make them disappear, whatever. I mean, who knows, that could explain most UFOs. Again, to go Richie from Boston, I've seen him with his Nikon P900 and he zooms in and it kind of looks like balls of plasma or light, or sort of like something's underwater, when he zooms in on the planets and stuff. It doesn't look like a solid object. To me, it looks like a plasma or something like that. That could be what it is. It could just be energy in the air within our atmosphere, and it's not exoplanetary or anything like that. Because I personally don't believe in space. I'm not a flat earther, but I don't believe it. I just don't. And I could get into that, but that's a whole other thing. But when I say Project BLUEBEAM, this is something to note because this guy, Sergei Monstadt, broke Project BLUEBEAM in 1994. That's what he's most known for. That's how we even know about it. He was a Quebecian investigative journalist, poet, and essayist. He's known for his Project BLUEBEAM, NASA, and associated conspiracy tropes. His works on Masonic conspiracy theories and the New World Order also remain popular with French-speaking conspiracy theorists. Let's get into where he died. Let's see. Yeah, by 1995 and 1996, Monstadt said he was being hunted by the police and authorities for involvement in quote-unquote networks of prohibited information. He had homeschooled his 2 children who were then taken away and made wards of the state in September 96 so that they would receive a public education. He died of a heart attack in his home in September 1996 at age 51, the day after being arrested and spending a night in jail. His followers claim his death was suspicious, suggesting he was assassinated by psychotronic weapons to keep from continuing his investigations, and that Jerry Fletcher, the Mel Gibson character in the 1997 film Conspiracy Theory, was modeled on him. The CIA admitted that they have weapons to cause heart attacks. Here's the clip.
Have you brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for? We have indeed. For killing people? Don't point it at me. I wonder if
Mitch, could you roll that over?
Roll that. Now, does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman. The round thing at the top is obviously the sight. The rest of it is what is practically a normal 45, although it's special. However, it works by electricity. There's a battery in the handle, and it fires a small dart.
So that when it fires silently?
Almost silently, yes. Very little.
What range does it have?
100 meters. 100 meters, I believe, about 100 yards, 100 meters.
About 100 meters range.
Right.
And the dart itself, when it strikes the target, does the target know that he's been hit and about to die?
That depends, Mr. Chairman, on the particular dart used. There are different kinds of these flechettes that were used in various weapon systems, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
So you guys can see this stuff exists. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is stuff that they openly admit and are forced to admit under various circumstances, like the church committee hearings. But yeah, guys, they have weapons that can give you heart attacks, and that gets into Breitbart too. Andrew Breitbart, can't even talk today, sound like I'm from Boston. Andrew Breitbart supposedly died of a heart attack. On the night of February 29th, 2012, Breitbart collapsed suddenly while walking in Brentwood. He was rushed to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead just after midnight. The doctors showed that he had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with focal coronary atherosclerosis and died of a heart attack. So yeah, this guy who said this, and this is on Twitter, guys. This is not a fake tweet. This is verified. He said this February 4th, 2011. He died in 2012. How prog guru John Podesta isn't household name as world-class underage sex slave op cover-upperer defending unspeakable dregs escapes me. So he accused John Podesta of being a human trafficker well before Pizzagate. Years before Pizzagate. 4 years before Pizzagate, guys. 4 or 5, actually. And he got killed with a heart attack. And the CIA has heart attack guns, just like this guy, Sergei Monast, who Monast, maybe none of you have heard of him, who brought Project BLUEBEAM to the forefront. Project BLUEBEAM is a project where supposedly they use lasers and technology, holographic technology, to fake an alien invasion as a way to get the New World Order that they want if nothing else works. Let me see if I can read it in his own words. In 1994, he published Project BLUEBEAM, in which he detailed his claim that NASA, with the help of the United Nations, was attempting to implement a new age religion with the Antichrist at its head and start a new world order via a technologically simulated second coming of Christ. He also gave talks on the topic. Other conspiracy theorists have noted the similarity of Project BLUEBEAM to the plots of Gene Roddenberry's unreleased 1975 Star Trek movie treatment, The God Thing, and the 1991 Star Trek Next Generation episodes Devil's Due. So yeah, Project BLUEBEAM, fake an invasion to get the new world order that they want if other things like terrorism and pandemics and all that don't work. But like I said, the connection to Elon Musk is just interesting because Elon wants to put a neural technology in your brain to enhance you. He also wants to colonize Mars. Wernher von Braun was the premier rocket scientist, actually helped develop the V2. German scientist. He was one of the best rocket scientists recognized in history as one of the best in the world. Now, Wernher von Braun was brought over to America in 1947 under a project called Operation Paperclip, where they took the best Nazi scientists, and brought them over, said, hey, let's wipe your slate clean, and now you can do stuff for us. And came out later on that that's what they did. But at the time, it was all hush-hush. So Wernher von Braun developed the V2 rocket, basically the father of modern rocketry besides, I think Parsons. Let's see. In 1944, von Braun was accused of secretly cooperating with communists and arrested by the SS. His crimes against the regime were never proven, so he was conditionally released and continued working on the development of ballistic missiles. However, at this time, he was already plotting his escape to the United States. He managed to escape to Austria and surrender to the U.S. Army in the spring of 1945. He was one of 1,500 German scientists who were secretly transported to the United States, Operation Paperclip. Since he was a pioneering scientist who expressed disgust toward the Nazi regime and its horrible genocidal policies, so he says, he was quickly employed by the U.S. Army and started developing ballistic missiles. In his V2, I believe, was used in the Apollo missions. He was interested in developing jet propulsion systems that could transport manned rockets to the moon and Mars. He got a chance to pursue his lifelong dream in 1957, but before that, he published several theoretical and fictional works that theorized the colonization of Mars and the construction of a space station in the Earth's orbit. His writings on the construction of a space station inspired the design concept of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. His paper is called The Mars Project, published in 1952. It was somewhat megalomaniacal, but also strangely prophetic. The book proposed a manned mission to Mars that would result in the planet's colonization and the establishment of an autonomous government there. The mission would include a fleet of 10 massive spacecrafts that would transport 70 astronauts and 9 crew vehicles. Braun made detailed calculations of all the aeronautical and engineering parameters of the mission, but although his grandiose plan attracted the attention of some wealthy people, it remained purely theoretical due to the limitations of 1950. The prophetic part of von Braun's work concerned the autonomous government of Mars. Namely, he proposed that instead of presidents, rulers of the colony would be appointed the title of Elon. The Martian government was directed by 10 men, the leaders of whom was elected by universal suffrage for 5 years and entitled Elon. 2 houses of parliament enacted the laws to be administered by the Elon and his cabinet. The upper house was called the Council of the Elders and was limited to a membership of 60 persons, each being appointed for life by the Elon as vacancies occurred by death. So that's kind of weird, huh?
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosen. In 1974, after being a 6th grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun, in the U.S. the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space." And I said, teachers don't stop until June. He said, "No, you have to understand, this is February, and we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies," he said, "against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system, the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids." And then he would repeat to me over and over, "And the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat." Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies.
So they're going to fake an alien invasion if that's the last thing they have to do. What did it say on his gravestone that I just showed you? He has Psalm 19:1 on there. "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." That is on his tombstone. Let's look up the word firmament. In biblical cosmology, the firmament is the vast, solid dome created by God on the second day to divide the primal sea into upper and lower portions, so that the dry land could appear. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Thus God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above. And it was so. And God made the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. So this guy, supposedly designing rockets to go into space, has Psalm 19:1 on his gravestone, which, like I said, reads word for word, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." Firmament in biblical cosmology is a solid dome created by God. Here's a depiction. A rocket is not going to go through there. And even if it did, how would it work in water above? That doesn't make sense. My point is, if this guy, or if this woman, Carol, was lying, that he didn't say this and he wasn't, actually saying there was going to be a staged alien invasion and terrorism and all these things were going to be used, why does he have that on his gravestone? So things to think about. So I'm going to end this video now, but there's a lot of stuff to think about, guys. Remote neural monitoring is definitely something that should scare the shit out of you. and I know I've crossed into other topics, but at the end of the day, all this stuff is connected to the same people, and it all ties in somehow. And if you really want to find a connection to one thing that seems unrelated to another, you could probably find it. So yeah, guys, research some of this stuff, look into it for yourselves, and I'm going to let you go. You have a good day.